Today, I'm going to answer all your questions about bulk aging and bottle aging of wine. In winemaking, the aging period is going to occur after fermentation is over. And if you're going to allow that wine to go through malolactic fermentation, it'll be after that's done too. So after all the microbial activity has finished up in that wine, that's what you would consider the aging period. And you'll hear people talk about, oh, bulk aging is better or bottle aging is better. And there is an advantage to each of those, and generally you'll do both. It's just a matter of how long you want to keep it bulk and, how long you want to plan on keeping it in the bottle. Bulk aging refers to the time period when, as the name suggests, the wine is stored in bulk. So whether that be in a carboy, a barrel, a stainless tank, that's going to be your bulk aging period. And for red wines and white wines, it's going to be treated a little bit differently. For a white wine, all I'm really trying to achieve is stability during this aging period. So there's going to be some flavor stability. I want to make sure that that wine clarifies. So I want all that kind of haze to kind of settle out of that wine. I don't want that stuff to be settling out in the bottle. And I also want to make sure that it's cold stable. So I want to make sure that any tartrates that are unstable, so potassium bitartrate that would fall out of that wine and form crystals, I prefer to have that happen in carboy rather than in bottle because it's a little bit unsightly in a bottle. So I'll treat rosés just like white wines. Any of the fruitier type, fruit forward wines that are maybe not as big and bold, generally I would age those at a minimum about 4 months. For red wine, on the other hand, I generally will do more like 10 to 18 months. And it really depends on that wine and the trajectory of that wine. So the advantage of keeping that red wine bulk is, as it's changing, which a red wine will really, really change over time. But as it's changing, you can kind of tune it and steer it in the direction that you want it to go. Versus once you get that wine in bottle, you're really done. You can't really make any changes to that wine. So some things that I'll watch with a red wine like this are, I want to make sure that it truly, really did complete malolactic fermentation. And you can test that, but what I like to do is allow it to go through at least one summer cycle. So if I start my wine in the fall, if it's from the northern hemisphere, I'll wait until it goes all the way around and back through summer. And what that does for me is, in the event that the malolactic may have, incompletely finished, or even the primary fermentation, you think every little bit of sugar is gone, but it's going to eat a little bit more sugar, maybe some sugars from the oak that you've put in. You want that to all happen. You don't in bulk. You don't want that to happen in the bottle. Another advantage of going one whole summer cycle like that is usually it means you're also getting a winter cycle. So an advantage of getting a winter cycle is you get the usually you'll get sort of cold stabilized. So any crystals that are going to fall out of this wine are going to happen during that winter cycle. So those are just the super high level basic advantages of a red wine. But I do also generally steer it with some products. So, traditionally you age red wine in an oak barrel, whether that be a new oak barrel or an old oak barrel. And that kind of is like the salt and pepper of the wine. So it kind of can, make that wine a little bit more approachable, kind of achieve a little bit of a balance with that wine. So in a carboy like this, I'll usually nice and slowly oak it. So I'll start a little bit conservative. I'll even start with different toast levels of oak. So I'll start with some light to medium toast oak. and just kind of achieve a little bit of a baseline of oak in the wine. And at, say, 8 months in, you're going to start to think, does this wine need more oak? Do I want more of that barbecue-y type American oak taste? Do I want a little bit more tannin? Is it a little bit thin or wimpy? And you can make those decisions in Carboy. And what I'll do, a lot of times towards the end, sometimes I'll step up to something like a medium plus toast, occasionally a heavy toast, or a blend of any of those toasts. Try to just dial that toast level in there. Additionally, say this wine's a little bit herbaceous, so it's got a little bit of that bell pepper green, and maybe I don't want that. What I can do in Carboy or in barrel is I can add some tannin to that. So I use something called Tannin Complex, and I'll put a link to this stuff in the description. And you can give that that green pyrazine something to kind of bind to, and try to kind of minimize it, or let it kind of naturally go away. So if you put this in the bottle too soon, you never have the advantage of doing any of these things. Now, some cautions of bulk aging. And I'll say generally bulk aging is a safe thing, but like I said, there are some cautions. So always be careful about things like oxidation. The beauty of a Carboy is it has this tiny, tiny neck. So you've got all this wine volume with a very, very small plug of air on top. Now that's only true if the Carboy is topped up to the neck. So always, always top up your Carboy. And if for some reason you can't top it up, you're gonna have to gas it with something like argon or nitrogen. And even at that, you're gonna constantly be, regassing it. And I personally, I'd rather just top up. So find a wine that's similar to your wine, top it up, find a smaller Carboy, do whatever you have to do. So that is one caution is, don't just assume because it's in bulk, it's gonna be resistant to oxidation. You also have to kind of keep an eye on your sulfite levels, things like that. Watch your airlocks. You definitely don't ever want an airlock to dry out. The cup style airlocks can actually, evaporate to a level that it looks like it has water in it, because it does, but it's actually allowing air to go underneath that cup and into the Carboy, which could pretty quickly ruin your wine. Watch out for silicone bungs. So there's some silicone breather style bungs, which they're fine for active ferments. I like them when I put a wine in the fridge to cold crash it, because it lets it breathe and it doesn't take up the height. But silicone is to some extent air porous. So I would never age for a long term on just those little silicone bungs with a thin flapper. Some other cautions: if you never put a wine near like a heater, if you have a radiator or something that's kicking on and off all day long, or an air conditioning vent kicking on and off, the last thing you want is this wine to expand and contract as it heats and cools, and basically suck a bubble of air this way, push a bubble of air this way, because it's one good way to really oxidize that wine. But if you do all those things, you really should have no trouble aging for, years really. The final thing I want to say about bulk aging and why I think it's a very important step, especially for something like a red wine that is, evolving over time, is I almost always blend to some extent before I bottle, and most wineries do too. It might be as simple as, a 10% blend, or it could be just a full-blown blend where I've got 40% of one wine, 30 of another, and 30 of another. But I would never want to blend a wine before that trajectory of that taste profile has sort of started to level out. Because you'll think you've dialed that blend in, you're loving this wine, then you throw it in a bottle, and 2-3 months later it's totally wimpy or just isn't what you thought it was. So the later you can wait, don't wait forever, you want to drink your wine, but the later you can weight to some extent, the more safe you're going to be with those blends. Now, let's talk about bottle aging. So this is, of course, when you're done, bulk aging, you've blended that wine. You think that wine is so perfect, now you put it in a bottle. Well, now you're bottle aging. And a lot of times you'll see on the back of a wine bottle from the store, it'll say, aged in oak barrels for 18 months and then bottle conditioned for 6 months. And I do think that's an important step. What you'll normally find when you very first bottle a wine is that it might not taste exactly like it did when you bottled it for that first, usually 1 month to 2 month time frame. And people call it bottle shock, and there's a lot of different theories about what causes this. It could be that little plug of oxygen that you put in when you push that cork in, just reacting with that wine and kind of, I don't know, maybe reacting with the volatile aromas that might come off that wine. But I always like to include in my plan for a wine just at the very least 1 or 2 months in the bottle before I start giving that wine away and saying, oh, you're going to love this wine, only to find out that something was a little bit weird for that first month. There's not a lot of real advantage to bottle aging. I would never say skip the bulk aging and just bottle age. I don't think that's a good idea. But let me take that back. There's one huge advantage of bottle aging is you get to drink the wine, and that's really why we're all here. So don't bulk age forever or you never get to drink the wine. But that is the beauty of bottle aging, is taste the wine. Like when you put it on the rack and you're done in the carboy, if you've got 30 bottles, don't say I'm going to wait for 2 years and then I'm going to drink this wine, because in 2 years it might have actually started to go beyond its prime drink date. I'd say open a bottle every month, every 2 months, and when it's really, really good, drink it and give it away to your friends, and maybe save a case, because it is nice to know maybe it will actually get better and you don't even know it. Some cautions with bottle aging. Make sure to use good high quality corks. I used a variety of corks historically, and what I found to be the best for the price are these Aquamark corks. So these are a natural cork that are actually kind of a lower grade cork, but what they've done is used cork dust to kind of pack in all the little pores of that dust, so it seals like a high grade cork at a price like a low grade cork, which is nice because you can spend a lot of money on corks, up to like 75 cents or $1 a cork. The other corks that would compete at this price level would be like your agglomerate corks that are the kind of compressed bits of cork. And if you're going to drink it within a year, those are totally fine. But after 3-4 years, I found those corks to kind of start to soften up and almost fall apart when you pull the cork out of the bottle. So don't use those corks for extended aging periods. When you store a wine that you're bottle aging, or let's just call it storing wine at this point, make sure to store that wine on its side, and it'll be fine on upright for a little while. But if you're going to store it for any period of time, like a year plus, just be sure to store that wine on its side. You don't want the cork to dry out. And if you keep that cork nice and wet and swelled up, it's really going to minimize the ability of that cork to suck any air into that bottle as the temperature fluctuates. And of course, that's another point. Assure that the wine is stored in an area of your house that's relatively temperature stable, so it's not trying to push air out and pull air back in and trying to sort of oxidize that wine. Make sure that you've properly sulfited your wine. I know there's a lot of people out there that try not to use sulfites, but if you're going to do that, just know that your wine's not going to age well and you better drink it relatively quick. And then finally, when you're bottle aging or storing bottles, keep it in a relatively cool area. And I know that we don't all have the ability to keep it at an optimal, 55 or 60 degrees. But if you've got a shadier area, I put mine in my basement on a wall that doesn't get a ton of sunlight and it's dirt on the exterior. And I've got some really old homemade wines here that I've opened even more recently, and they're still hanging in there. And I'm not sure if I could say that would be the case if I've stored it somewhere where it's like 80 degrees occasionally. So those are, I would say those are the main basics of bulk aging and bottle aging. I hope I would answer any of your questions on this stuff. I know it's kind of a large and broad topic to cover, so if you have any more questions, make sure to pose them in the comments section and I'll do my best to answer them. And also be sure to check out my website, smartwinemaking.com, and if you haven't already subscribed to the YouTube channel, make sure to click the little subscribe button below and the bell if you want to be notified for more videos. Thanks for watching.